I was slicing strawberries for Olivia's birthday cake when I heard it. The words slid through the air like a knife across icing, casual, effortless, unforgiving. She's not family. She's just the nanny. It took a second for my brain to accept that I'd heard it right. I turned slightly from the kitchen island, peeking around the corner. Megan stood by the doorway to the playroom, sipping from a champagne flute, her voice smooth and careless as she spoke to one of the mothers from her daughter's kindergarten class. A woman in white linen nodded politely, clearly uncomfortable. "She helps out a lot," Megan added. "Godsend, really. But we've been looking into a daycare. It's time we move forward." The other woman glanced toward me, unsure whether to smile or apologize with her eyes. I looked down at the strawberries, not trusting my voice. My hands kept moving. Cut, shift, slice. I'd sliced fruit for Olivia's first solid meal, her lunchboxes, her fever snacks, her teething days. Now apparently, I was just the nanny. I wasn't surprised. Not really. There had been signs for months. Megan had started calling me by my first name in front of the children. "Linda, can you grab her jacket?" "Linda," she spilled juice again. At first it stung like a paper cut. Barely visible, but sharp. My son Brian used to notice. Used to correct her. "She's grandma," he once said in front of the pediatrician. "She's helped raise both our kids." But he'd stopped saying that lately. He'd stopped noticing much of anything, really. The party had been Megan's idea, from the menu to the decorations. All I'd done was make the cake. Olivia had asked for strawberries and whipped cream, just like every year. I had used the same recipe I'd learned from my mother, the one I made for Brian when he was 7, the one that used real vanilla extract and a cold metal bowl to whip the cream just right. That cake sat now on the corner of the buffet table, untouched, dwarfed by a store-bought unicorn monstrosity Megan had picked up, just in case. The candles had been lit on that one, not mine. I finished arranging the fruit and stepped away from the kitchen. The air was thick with perfume and artificial sugar. The women in the living room sipped champagne and laughed, their voices rising like birds startled into flight. I walked quietly to the guest bathroom, locked the door behind me, and sat on the closed toilet seat. I didn't cry. I haven't in years, but my throat was tight. When I first moved in with Brian and Megan, Olivia was barely out of diapers and baby Jacob had just started walking. Megan had wanted to return to work after maternity leave, and childcare in our part of town was absurdly expensive. I had just retired after 37 years of working as a public librarian. My pension wasn't huge, but my time was finally mine, or so I thought. Brian called one night. Megan was crying in the background. "Mom, we need help," he said. "Just for a year, maybe 2. I didn't hesitate. I packed up my one-bedroom apartment, sold most of my furniture, and moved into their spare room, a space that once served as a home gym. Megan greeted me at the door with a tight smile and an oversweet hug. "We'll never forget this," she'd said. "You'll always be part of the family." At first it was wonderful. I took Olivia on stroller walks every morning, taught her colors using the spines of books, and kept Jacob from licking electrical outlets. I made lunch, I picked up Cheerios, I read them bedtime stories with silly voices. But over time, things shifted. I stopped being invited to family dinners out. My meals became leftover pasta or toast, eaten standing at the counter. Megan started referring to their parenting choices, and I was expected to follow suit without comment. If I disagreed with screen time or sugary snacks, I was being rigid. When Jacob got the flu, I was the one up all night, cleaning up vomit and soothing his fever dreams. Megan posted about it online. "Rough night with the kids," she wrote. "But we made it." We. Tonight, I sat alone in the bathroom until the last guest left. I heard the front door close and the rustle of plastic gift bags. I emerged quietly, wiping my hands on my apron. The kitchen was a mess. Paper plates with cake residue, juice boxes half drunk, pink frosting smeared on the counter. Megan stood by the sink, scrolling through her phone. She didn't look up. "I cleaned what I could," I said softly. She replied without turning. "Thanks." I looked around the house, now quiet, the remnants of joy discarded like the party hats on the floor. Brian came in from the garage, brushing crumbs off his shirt. "Cake was great, Mom. The strawberry one," he said. Megan snorted faintly. "She used real cream. You could taste the calories." Brian chuckled without defending me. I walked to my room, the room with a twin bed, a plastic drawer organizer, and the quilt I brought from my old apartment. I sat at the edge of the bed, folded my apron, and placed it on my lap. There was a knock on the door. Olivia peeked in. Grandma? My chest ached. Yes, honey. She stepped in, still in her princess dress, her face sticky with sugar and joy. She crawled onto the bed beside me. Mom said I can't sleep with you anymore, but I want to. I brushed the hair from her eyes, gently. I know, sweetheart, but it's okay. She nodded, trying to be brave. You're not a nanny, she whispered. I smiled, not for Megan, not for Brian, but for her. For this little girl who still knew who I was, even if the world around her wanted to rewrite it. I'm your grandma, I said, holding her close, and that's something no one can take away. I didn't sleep much that night. Olivia eventually drifted off beside me, her small breath soft against my arm. I waited until her limbs grew heavy with real sleep before carrying her back to her room. She stirred only once, clutching my finger for a second in her sleep. I stayed there a moment longer than I should have, adjusting her blanket, smoothing her curls, whispering a prayer I hadn't said in years. When I returned to my room, I sat at the edge of the bed again, staring at the dark window. The reflection staring back wore the shape of someone helpful, someone loyal, someone exhausted, someone invisible. I didn't recognize myself. By morning, the smell of coffee wafted from the kitchen. Megan never drank it, too acidic, she claimed, so it must have been Brian. I stepped in quietly. He looked up from the newspaper, gave a vague nod, and returned to the sports section. His eyes didn't linger. Good morning, I said. He grunted something back that resembled agreement. Olivia and Jacob were already dressed and fed. Their backpacks sat by the door. Megan was nowhere in sight. I'll take them to school, I said, expecting at least a glance. Brian shrugged. We already hired someone. Megan found a service last night. That took a second to settle. A service? He flipped the page. A professional nanny. Certified. She starts Monday. The word felt sharp again, but this time it hit deeper. You didn't discuss this with me. Brian glanced up, finally. His eyes, once so open and kind, held an odd distance. Mom, it's not personal. Megan thinks, well, we both think, maybe it's time you had less on your plate. The words weren't cruel. They were careful, practiced. And what do you suggest I do instead? I asked. He hesitated. You've done a lot, really, but Megan wants things more structured. She's looking into preschool programs for Jacob, afternoon enrichment stuff for Olivia, things you can't really offer. I stood there, apron still tied from last night. My hands rested on the table, steady, though the rest of me wavered. Is that how you see me now? I asked. Not a grandmother, not family, just someone who's aging out of usefulness? Brian winced, but said nothing. I nodded and walked out. I didn't wait to hear his explanation. I didn't trust I could listen without breaking. In my room, I opened the drawer beneath the quilt chest. I reached behind my spare Bible and pulled out the file folder I'd kept tucked away for 3 years. Cream-colored, crisp corners. Inside it, the emergency guardianship agreement Megan and Brian had both signed after Jacob was born. They were traveling for a wedding in Arizona at the time and wanted just-in-case papers in place. I remembered Megan handing me the pen at the kitchen table. You're practically raising them anyway, she'd joked. Back then, I took it as a compliment. The notarized copy sat in that folder untouched ever since. They probably forgot about it, but I hadn't. That morning, I made a phone call I hadn't made in over a decade. Leonard Jacobson Law, said the receptionist. How can we help you? Is Leonard still practicing? I asked. Tell him it's Linda Garrett, from the Delaney Library Board. There was a pause. 1 moment, please. When Leonard's voice came on, warm and gravel-thick, I nearly cried. Linda, good God, it's been years. You still wearing that apron with the cardinals on it? I laughed, despite myself. Still embroidered, still red, and I need your help. Within an hour, I was sitting in his downtown office. It hadn't changed. Same heavy wooden chairs, same brass lamp. The smell of old books and brewed coffee hung in the air like a memory. Leonard scanned the guardianship document, his brow rising. Well, he said slowly, this is very real. I want to know my options, I said. They're phasing me out, Leonard, but I've raised those children. I've been more mother than Megan's ever tried to be, and now they've decided I'm obsolete. He nodded, still reading. Has there been any neglect, endangerment, evidence of instability in the home? Not overt, I said, but emotional distance, manipulation. The kids have come to me sobbing, asking why their mother won't talk to them at night. I've bandaged scraped knees, she didn't even notice. I've missed doctor's appointments she never scheduled, and now she wants to replace me like a malfunctioning appliance. Leonard folded his hands. This gives you temporary custodial authority if the parents are unavailable, but with enough evidence that you've been the primary caretaker for an extended period, and if we can show it's in the children's best interest, you could petition for something stronger. Like what? He looked at me evenly. Legal guardianship. Possibly full custody. I exhaled slowly, the room tilting just slightly under the weight of those words. You think I'd win? I think, he said, judges listen to those who've already been showing up, and you've been showing up for years. When I got home that afternoon, Megan was in the kitchen. We're going to have a talk soon, she said as if she'd been waiting for me to return. About roles, boundaries, schedules. I'd like that, I said, walking past her. She didn't expect that answer. In my room, I took off my apron and hung it neatly on the back of the chair. Then I sat and began to write. A list. Dates, events, witnesses. I listed everything. Every vaccination I had taken them to, every night I sat with Olivia during a fever, every note I signed when their teachers sent homework back. This wasn't war, it was preparation. I was done being erased. By the following Wednesday, I had filled half the notebook. Every entry was a moment I had once considered too ordinary to matter. A record of forgotten routines, dismissed care, who packed Olivia's lunches every Monday, who taught Jacob how to zip his jacket, who changed the bedding after Megan forgot to dry the laundry. Each item was a quiet truth, scribbled in firm lines. My handwriting, steady and methodical, felt like the only voice I still had. Leonard called to confirm that he'd filed the motion for review of custody eligibility. It was, as he put it, an exploratory petition. We weren't pulling the children out of the home. Not yet. We were simply telling the court that someone else existed, someone who had for years carried what others only claimed. Later that afternoon, Megan cornered me in the hallway. She'd been on the phone, whispering again, likely to Brian. Linda, she said, brushing her blouse as if the hallway dust offended her. Can we have a conversation? I nodded, holding her gaze. Of course. She motioned toward the kitchen. I followed. The counters were immaculate. Too clean. She'd cleaned as if guests were coming, or something messier was brewing. She poured herself sparkling water and didn't offer me any. I think there's been a misunderstanding, she began, wrapping her fingers around the glass. I've noticed a distance lately. You've replaced me, I said plainly. She blinked. I wouldn't say that. No, I tilted my head. You hired a nanny, revoked my school pickup permissions, and told Olivia I'd be taking a step back. That sounds like a replacement. She frowned, setting her glass down. Brian and I are trying to establish consistency. You're getting older. We didn't want to burden you. That's generous of you, I said, folding my hands in front of my apron. Except I was never a burden until you decided I was. She stiffened. That's not what this is about. This is about setting boundaries. About our kids seeing us as the primary authority. I watched her carefully. I've never undermined you, Megan. I've picked up where you left off. Her jaw flexed. Well, it's not your place anymore. I nodded, the words sinking, though they no longer cut the way they once did. Then she added, You've been helpful, Linda, but sometimes we outgrow help. I said nothing. I simply turned and walked out. That night, Olivia didn't ask for a bedtime story. Jacob didn't crawl into my lap. Something had shifted. Children feel it long before they understand it. At breakfast the next morning, the new nanny arrived. Her name was Sierra, young, cheerful, with an upturned ponytail and the scent of fabric softener trailing behind her. She wore a pastel uniform shirt with a badge, professional, clean, controlled. Olivia hid behind the chair. Jacob clung to his juice cup. I introduced myself politely, then excused myself from the table. I stood behind the hallway archway and watched as Megan gave Sierra a tour, complete with laminated instructions. She didn't point out the emergency snack drawer I'd stocked or the loose kitchen tile you had to avoid stepping on. She didn't mention Jacob's fear of balloons or Olivia's tendency to pretend everything's fine until it isn't. None of it mattered now. By afternoon, I was sitting with Leonard again. I don't want to tear the family apart, I told him. But they're writing me out, Leonard, like a contract they regret signing. He pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose. Linda, what you're doing isn't vindictive, it's protective. You're making space for truth. The court will decide if that truth matters. He'd requested a hearing, preliminary, informal, but significant. We had 1 week. 1 week to gather what I already carried, proof of love, of time, of presence. At home, I started copying text messages to paper, the reminders Megan had sent over the years. Can you get Olivia from ballet? Jacob's fever spiked. Please stay with him. He only wants you when he's scared. I saved voicemails, screenshotted school forms with my name listed as the emergency guardian. One night, after everyone was asleep, I sat at the dining table and opened Olivia's art portfolio. I wasn't supposed to touch it anymore. Megan had moved it from the hallway gallery wall to a bin in the closet. Each drawing had tiny details that broke me. A crayon picture of her family. 3 figures. One tall man with glasses, a woman with long hair, a woman with a white braid and an apron. Underneath it, in crooked handwriting, me, mommy, daddy, and grandma, the real boss. I tucked it into my notebook. A few days later, Brian asked to talk. We sat on the back porch. It was quiet, just wind and the low hum of distant traffic. Megan's worried, he said, rubbing his forehead. She says you're acting strategic. I smiled faintly. Wouldn't you, if you were being erased? I don't want this to get ugly, Mom. I nodded. Neither do I, but what I want even less is to vanish quietly. He didn't reply. I placed my hand on his. I'm not your enemy, Brian, but I won't pretend anymore. Not for her comfort, not for yours. He swallowed hard, then nodded. That night I overheard Megan hissing into the phone. She's serious. I think she's going to the court. No, I don't know if she has a lawyer, but she's not backing down, and Brian's being useless. I swear, if she wins custody. The door creaked as I stepped away. Her voice stopped. I didn't need to hear more. I'd already heard enough. The night before the hearing, I barely slept. There was a stillness in the house, but not the comforting kind. This silence was tight, intentional. No doors creaked, no voices carried, even the refrigerator hummed quieter. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, counting backward from 100, trying to slow my thoughts. My suitcase sat at the foot of the bed, not because I intended to run, but because I had promised myself I wouldn't return if the outcome went sideways. There are moments when retreat becomes preservation, and then there are moments when retreat is just surrender, wearing polite shoes. At dawn, I rose without an alarm. My routine held me steady. Coffee, folded robe, neat hair. I pressed my apron with the warm edge of the iron, the one with the red cardinal stitched just below the pocket, and tied it like armor. In the mirror, I looked like someone who'd raised a family, not someone preparing to be cross-examined. Olivia padded into the kitchen as I sipped my coffee. Her eyes were still puffy from sleep, her voice small. Grandma, are you mad at Mommy? I set my cup down slowly. I'm not mad, sweetheart, but sometimes grown-ups see the same picture differently, and sometimes people have to speak up to be seen at all. She tilted her head. Are you going somewhere? I'm going to talk to someone who helps make decisions. Like a principal? I smiled gently. Yes, very much like that. She reached for my hand, and I let her hold it until Megan's voice called from down the hallway. Olivia, come on, time to get ready. She let go reluctantly and whispered, I hope they know you're the best at snacks. And just like that, my hands were shaking again. The courthouse was cold in that official sterile way. Polished floors, overhead lights too bright, walls painted in a shade of neutrality designed to wear you down. Leonard was already waiting when I arrived. He stood when he saw me and gave a small respectful nod. You ready? He asked. I've been ready for a long time, I said. The hearing wasn't dramatic. There were no slammed gavels, no gasps from the gallery. It was held in a small family court chamber, just a judge, a clerk, Leonard, myself, and Megan, who arrived 5 minutes late, all sharp angles in a beige coat, no children in sight. Brian hadn't come. Leonard opened with calm confidence. He laid out a detailed timeline of my involvement in Olivia and Jacob's lives, emphasizing the length and consistency of my care. He presented the emergency guardianship form, the signed statements, the screenshots, the school forms, and even the art portfolio page that Olivia had drawn. Megan tried to speak over him once, but the judge raised a hand. You'll have your time. When she finally did speak, her tone was controlled but defensive. She's exaggerating. I've always been there for my children. She was helping, yes, but that doesn't make her their parent. This feels calculated. Calculated? The judge asked. Megan hesitated. She's been collecting things, emails, drawings. It feels manipulative. Leonard stood again. Collecting evidence is not manipulation, it's preservation. Then he added something quiet but sharp. If her presence was so minimal, why did you sign legal documents making her a temporary guardian during travel and emergencies? Megan didn't answer. The judge took notes, pausing occasionally. Finally, she looked at me directly. "Mrs. Garrett," she said, "why now?" I looked her in the eye and replied, "Because I stayed quiet when they erased my name from school pickups, when they told the children I was moving away before I knew it myself, because I fed and bathed and comforted those kids for years, and one day I was no longer allowed to tuck them in. I am not trying to steal children, I am trying to keep them from being treated like an inconvenience." The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full of recognition. Afterward, Leonard walked me out of the building. "The judge will deliberate, could take a week, sometimes more," he said, "but you held your ground." I wasn't sure if I'd feel relief, I said, exhaling, "but it's just stillness." He nodded. "Stillness can be good. It means the storm passed, even if the rain's not done falling." I returned home later that evening to a different kind of quiet. Megan wasn't there. Brian was in the living room, tie loosened, staring at the TV without sound. He looked up as I entered. "She told me what happened," he said. I nodded, waiting. "She thinks you've declared war." I didn't reply. Then he asked, "Why didn't you come to me first?" I sat across from him. "Because the last few times I tried to speak, you weren't listening. You were nodding, smiling, but not hearing." He swallowed, looked down. She's afraid you'll win." "I'm not interested in winning, Brian. I'm interested in protect." He didn't argue, just leaned back and closed his eyes like the weight of it all had finally reached his bones. And for once, he didn't ask me to stay quiet. That night, I returned to the dining table. I removed the drawing from the notebook and placed it in a new folder, one that read, "For them." It was time I left behind more than evidence. It was time I left a record of love that no court or parent could erase. The letter came 4 days later. It was tucked in between a stack of grocery store flyers and a bank statement I didn't recognize. The envelope was thick, the kind that feels important before you even open it. My name was typed cleanly in the center, no return address, just the seal of the county court printed faintly in the corner. I didn't rush. I took it to the kitchen, made a cup of tea, and sat down at the table as though it were just another quiet afternoon. When I finally tore it open, I didn't read the first line. I read the signature at the bottom, Judge Kathleen Brower. Then I read it from the top. "Based on testimony, documentation, and the best interest of the children, this court recognizes Mrs. Linda Garrett standing to petition for extended legal custody of Olivia and Jacob Carter, and hereby grants temporary shared guardianship, effective immediately, pending a formal custody review." I sat very still. It wasn't final custody, not yet, but it was acknowledgement. Legally binding recognition that I had not just existed in the background, that my years had not been invisible. I ran my fingers over the embossed seal. My hands trembled, not from joy or victory, but from a strange, hollow release. It's what happens when you've braced yourself for so long you forget how to stand without flinching. Brian was the first to say something. He came home early that evening. I was setting down Olivia's homework folder when he walked through the door, not with his usual tired shuffle, but as if he was walking into something he didn't know how to face. "I saw the letter," he said, not even taking off his coat. I looked up but didn't speak. He swallowed hard. "Does this mean you're I'm not taking anyone," I said softly. "I'm being given the right to care for them, legally, openly, without being pushed aside." He pulled out a chair and sat, elbows on his knees. He looked smaller than I remembered. "I didn't mean for it to get this far," he said. "I thought Megan said it was temporary, that we were just resetting things." "You didn't mean to lose them," I said, "but you did mean to lose me." He looked up at that. "You chose not to defend me when it counted. Not in the kitchen, not with the school, not when Megan called me just the nanny. You nodded along because it was easier." I was trying to keep the peace. "And in doing that," I said, "you taught your children to silence the people who love them most." The words didn't come from anger. They came from the still space left behind by disappointment. "I'm not shutting you out, Brian," I added, "but I won't be dismissed anymore." He nodded, slowly. "I understand." But I wasn't sure he did. Not really. Megan's reaction was less composed. She cornered me 2 mornings later while Brian loaded the kids into the car. "You blindsided me," she said, her voice sharp and low. You took this to court behind our backs. You made decisions behind mine, I said. Only difference is, I had to clean up after yours. Her eyes flashed. You're not their mother. No, I agreed. I'm the woman who stayed when their mother left for book clubs and spa days. I'm the one who knew their favorite socks and their allergy triggers and the name of the stuffed giraffe that Jacob won't sleep without. You're obsessed, she said, trying to dismiss the weight in my words. No, I said again, quieter this time. I'm invested. She stepped back, folding her arms. This isn't over. I know, I said, but it's no longer yours to end alone. She left without another word. That weekend, Olivia brought me her math folder and asked if I could come to her parent-teacher meeting on Thursday. Mom says she's busy, she explained, but I really want to show you my volcano project. I'd love to, I told her. And I meant it. Jacob curled up beside me that night while I read from a chapter book we'd been chipping away at for weeks. He asked if I was going to leave like the other babysitters. I told him I wasn't going anywhere, and for the first time in months, he believed me. On Sunday, I returned to Leonard's office with a binder full of photos, school records, printed emails, and a new letter from Olivia's teacher. I think we're ready for the next step, I said, setting it down on his desk. He opened the binder, flipping through the pages. You're making a strong case, he said. They're not going to see you as just a relative. They'll see you as a parent. I already am one, I said. He looked up, smiling faintly. Then let's help the court see that too. By evening, I found myself in the children's room. It was a rare moment of quiet. Jacob was napping, and Olivia was drawing in the corner. I picked up a small sock from the floor, folded it, and placed it in the laundry basket. There, tucked between a toy train and an old blanket, was the giraffe Jacob couldn't sleep without. Its neck was bent, and one ear was torn at the seam. I sat down at the edge of the bed, needle and thread in hand. I'd fixed this ear before, twice. As I stitched, I realized the thread was doing more than holding fabric together. It was tying back every moment that had been unraveled by someone else's apathy. I couldn't undo the years where I was invisible, but I could mend what they never valued, one seam at a time. The next court hearing was set for a Thursday morning. The timing wasn't ideal. Jacob had a cold, and Megan had conveniently scheduled a personal wellness retreat that same week. She didn't say it to my face. I overheard her through the kitchen wall as she left a voicemail for her friend. I just can't be around all that courtroom drama. It's too toxic. Brian said nothing. He had stopped trying to convince either of us to stand down. He left early for work most days, coming home late, stepping into the space between us without ever planting his feet. But I moved forward. The night before the hearing, I gathered everything again. Updated health records, photographs of school pickups, even printouts of my library book checkouts under Olivia's name. It was meticulous, not because I doubted the truth, but because I knew how easily a story could be bent without hard lines. Before bedtime, I told the children I would be gone early in the morning, but promised to return in time for Olivia's parent-teacher conference that afternoon. She clutched my hand. Do I have to go to the meeting with Mommy again? She asked. You'll be with me, I said, and I'm bringing snacks. Her face lit up. It always amazed me how something as small as sliced apples and cinnamon crackers could ground a child in a world so chaotic. Jacob, already sniffling and dozing, stirred on the couch. I kissed the top of his head. His fever had dropped, but he was still warm, clingy in that fragile way that children get when they don't know what's shifting around them, only that it is. Leonard and I sat side by side on the courtroom bench. He reviewed the opening statements again, but I barely heard him. I watched the room, the clerk arranging folders, the judge quietly sipping coffee, the court officer near the back door. It felt less like a battlefield this time, and more like a stage waiting for truth to finally speak. When my name was called, I walked up slowly, hands folded, back straight. The judge, a different one this time, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a quiet, observant presence, looked over her glasses. Mrs. Garrett, you've requested full legal custody of your grandchildren, citing prolonged primary care and documented neglect by the parents. Are you prepared to present new evidence? Yes, Your Honor, I said. My voice didn't shake. Leonard began. He laid out the timeline again, but this time he added Olivia's school reports, noting her anxiety drop during the periods I had stepped back from care. He referenced Jacob's medical records, signed under my guardianship. He presented the pediatrician's letter, stating I had been the primary contact for over 2 years. Then I was asked to speak. I'm not here to punish anyone, I began, But I am here because for too long, what I did quietly was dismissed. They called me a nanny, a helper, someone convenient, until I became inconvenient, but I have been their constant. I pulled a photo from my bag. It was Olivia, age 4, asleep on my chest, with Jacob curled beside us, both clinging to a woman the court once didn't know existed. They didn't cry for their mother when they were sick, they cried for me. The judge didn't flinch, she listened. Then she turned to Megan's lawyer, who appeared alone at the table, flicking through notes with visible discomfort. "Where are the parents today?" the judge asked. "Megan Carter is traveling. Mr. Carter was unavailable due to work obligations." "Did they provide formal statements of opposition?" "No, Your Honor." The judge nodded once and leaned back. "Then it appears the party showing up is also the one who has been showing up all along." She took a breath, then added, "This court recognizes Mrs. Garrett as the children's legal custodian, effective immediately, with full decision-making rights pertaining to education, medical care, and day-to-day welfare. Visitation rights for the biological parents will be addressed in follow-up proceedings." I didn't cry. I didn't even move. But I felt the tectonic shift inside me, not triumph, just truth being given a nameplate. The school conference was that afternoon. I arrived 10 minutes early, holding a paper bag with Olivia's favorite snacks. Her teacher, Ms. Delaney, smiled when she saw me. "Ms. Garrett," she said warmly, "I wasn't sure who to expect today." "I replied. "We had an important morning, but we made it." Olivia rushed in, wearing her sparkly shoes and a cardigan I had mended that week. She grinned when she saw the snacks, then threw her arms around me without hesitation. The meeting went well. Her reading comprehension had jumped 2 levels. She was helping other students with group projects. The teacher said she was more focused lately, more emotionally steady. "She seems grounded now," Ms. Delaney said. "She's being seen," I replied. That evening, I returned home to a quiet kitchen. Megan still hadn't returned. Brian sat at the table with a beer and a stare that didn't meet mine. "I heard," he said. I nodded. "The court made a decision." He said nothing for a long moment. Then finally, "I don't know if I should thank you or hate you." "I'm not asking for either," I said, "but I'll keep doing what I've always done, raising your children with love." He didn't stop me as I left the room. That, at least, was progress. In the children's room, I tucked Olivia into bed. She held the same giraffe I'd repaired days before. "Did the important people believe you?" she whispered. "Yes," I said. "They heard me." "Good," she mumbled. "I already did." The next morning, I opened the door to my room and found a folded envelope pushed underneath it. There was no name on the front, no handwriting at all, just a blank sheet of paper inside with 2 words typed in bold. "You won." That was it. No signature, no explanation, no apology. But I didn't need one to recognize Megan's silence. She'd returned home sometime after midnight, likely after Brian had already turned in. Her perfume lingered faintly in the hallway, the kind she wore only when she wanted to seem in control. I left the note on the counter beside the fruit bowl and went back to packing the children's weekend bag. Jacob had a play date with a neighbor, and Olivia had asked if we could make cloud cookies again, the ones I used to bake with lemon zest and powdered sugar that puffed up like little pillows. It felt strange making plans with freedom. Strange, but right. Brian came into the kitchen while I was measuring flour. He stood quietly for a while, watching as I preheated the oven and pulled down the mixing bowl. "She won't stay long," he said. "She already talked to a friend in Charlotte, something about needing space." I stirred the batter gently. "You think that's for the best?" He hesitated. "I don't know what's best anymore. I just know the kids are calmer with you, and I'm tired of pretending that doesn't matter." There wasn't anything to say to that, so I handed him the whisk. "Then help me finish the batter." We spent that Saturday as we always should have, not waiting for someone to grant us permission to feel like a family. The cookies cooled on wire racks while Olivia colored next to the window and Jacob built a city out of blocks. We read books, watched half of a nature documentary about whales, and played a game of Go Fish that ended with Olivia dramatically flopping onto the rug and declaring herself the fishiest loser alive. I let her win the next round. There were no outbursts, no tension creeping in from the corners of the house. Megan stayed mostly in the bedroom. Brian helped with dinner, washed the dishes, then sat with Olivia while she practiced reading aloud. I watched from the hallway, a paper towel in my hands, pretending to wipe the doorknob just so I could stand there a little longer. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, I passed Megan in the hallway. She was wearing one of those silky robes with lace trim, the kind she used to wear to feel untouchable. "You won't keep them forever," she said without turning. "I'm not keeping them," I replied. "I'm raising them." She turned sharply. "They're not yours." "They are loved," I said, "and that's more than a bloodline." We stood there, two women tethered by the same children, but walking in opposite directions. "You think I'm a villain," she said, her voice lower now, almost human. "No," I replied, "I think you're a woman who walked away from the hardest parts of motherhood and resented the person who stayed." Her lips tightened. She didn't deny it. "I'm leaving next week," she said. "Charlotte, I need a restart." "I hope you find one," I said. She waited like she wanted me to say more, but I didn't. On Sunday, I opened the spare room closet to find it still full, boxes of Megan's seasonal shoes, unopened skincare sets, and stacks of gift bags from birthday parties long past. It was supposed to be the room for the kids now, a space to call theirs. But like everything else, she had left the cleanup behind. I pulled on my gloves and got to work. I didn't do it angrily. I sorted gently. I made piles. Donate, discard, maybe. I opened each box, unzipped every pouch. I found receipts for yoga classes she never attended, holiday cards she never mailed, and at the very bottom of a floral hat box, a drawing from Olivia, crumpled but still colorful. It was a stick figure family. Brian, Megan, herself, Jacob, and me. We were all holding hands. Across the top, Olivia had written in blocky blue letters, "My safe people." I placed it on the top of the keep pile. By late afternoon, the room was almost bare. I vacuumed the carpet, wiped down the baseboards, and opened the window to let in the breeze. It carried the scent of warm pavement and grass clippings. The sound of children riding scooters echoed down the block. I sat on the floor in the middle of the empty room, exhausted but satisfied. A space reclaimed, not out of bitterness, but necessity. Brian peeked in. "I figured she left it all," he said. "She always did." He lowered himself onto the floor beside me. "You know, Olivia asked if we can paint the walls pink." I smiled. "Let her choose the shade, even if it's something outrageous." He nodded. "She asked if she could put your name on the door." That stopped me. She said, "Can I write that this is Grandma's room too? Since she keeps our feelings safe here." My throat tightened. I pressed my hand to the carpet. "I guess we both won something," I said. Brian didn't argue. He just sat with me in the quiet. By the time Megan's ride arrived on Tuesday morning, the house was already humming with school lunch prep. I just finished cutting the crusts off Olivia's sandwich when the doorbell rang. Megan appeared at the top of the stairs, her suitcase already waiting in the foyer. She didn't say much, just looked around the house as if taking inventory of a place she once occupied but never truly inhabited. Brian offered to help carry her things. She waved him off. He stepped back, unsure of what to do with his hands. Olivia watched from behind the hallway banister, peeking through the posts like a child watching a stranger move through her home. "I'll come back for the rest later," Megan said flatly. I nodded. "I boxed most of it." She raised an eyebrow, but didn't push. Her phone buzzed. Her ride had arrived. She adjusted her sunglasses, though the morning light was still soft and forgiving. "I hope they don't grow up resenting you," she said, "for keeping them from their mother." "They'll grow up knowing who stayed," I replied. Her jaw clenched, but she didn't argue, maybe because she didn't have the strength anymore, or maybe because deep down she knew the truth no longer bent in her favor. She turned and walked out without a goodbye. Jacob didn't ask where she went. Not that day, not the next. Children don't always need explanations. They feel the difference in routines, in absence, in the way air becomes easier to breathe. That week, Olivia began calling the spare room our project room. We went to the hardware store together, she in her paint-smeared overalls, me with a folded list in the pocket of my apron. She picked 2 shades of pink, unable to decide between rosebud bloom and marshmallow blush, so we blended both. I let her paint the first corner. Her strokes were uneven, splotchy, proud. "You sure this is okay?" she asked, glancing at me. "I'm not after perfect," I told her. "I'm after yours." She beamed and dipped her brush again. We moved slowly, painting in sections, taking breaks for lemonade and banana slices, Jacob toddling in to supervise with his toy truck in one hand and a cracker in the other. Brian offered to help once, but Olivia insisted it had to be grandma-powered. In those hours, something softened between us all. Not a fix, not a repair, but the quiet beginning of a better shape. Later that weekend, while Olivia was asleep and Jacob snoring gently on the couch, I opened the last box Megan had left behind. I hadn't touched it yet, not because I was afraid of its contents, but because I wasn't ready to carry more weight than I already did. Inside were fragments of a life paused, a velvet pouch with jewelry, receipts from restaurants we were never invited to, a dried corsage from some long-forgotten event. At the bottom, buried beneath a mess of old scarves, was a small photo album I didn't recognize. I sat at the table, unfastened the leather strap, and flipped it open. The first photo was of Megan and Brian, young, just engaged, sitting on a bench by a lake. He looked carefree, years before the strain carved shadows into his face. She looked soft, almost gentle. Page after page, their life unfolded: honeymoon shots, ultrasound printouts, baby shower gifts, the first hospital bracelet from Olivia's birth. Then, one page that stopped me. It was a photograph of me, holding newborn Olivia, wrapped in a pastel blanket. I was seated in a rocking chair, my apron stained with formula, my hair unkempt, my eyes tired but bright. The caption beneath it, in Megan's handwriting, said, "Linda, the only one who could get her to sleep." I closed the album gently. Sometimes, people rewrite their stories out of fear. Sometimes, they leave behind evidence of the truth without meaning to. That night, Brian knocked on my door. He had 2 mugs of tea, and a look on his face that wasn't quite regret, but maybe the cousin of it. "Thanks," I said, taking the mug. He sat across from me. "I've been thinking about that day in court," he said, "what you said about who stayed. It's been ringing in my head like a bell I didn't know needed ringing." I didn't respond. I let him speak. I watched things happen, and didn't interfere. That wasn't neutrality, it was neglect, and I think I was so afraid of conflict that I forgot what protecting someone looks like. I looked at him for a long moment. "Then start protecting them now," I said. "Be their father, not just the man in the photos." He nodded slowly. "I want to repaint the trim in Olivia's new room," he said. "She asked me if I could help her write safe place above the window in bubble letters." "Let her choose the font," I said, and we both smiled. By Monday, Megan's name was no longer listed on the emergency contact forms at school. I updated the pediatrician's office and filed the new insurance paperwork. It wasn't about removing her out of cruelty, it was about protecting what had been proven. And protecting means clarity. Jacob's fever didn't return. Olivia began sleeping through the night again. There were fewer tantrums, less tension in the hallways, more laughter during dinner. Every so often, I still checked the mailbox for letters from Megan. None came, but I no longer waited. She had left her story behind, and in its place, we began building our own. The school year was nearly over when Olivia brought home a permission slip for the class picnic. She handed it to me without fanfare, already moving on to pull out her math workbook and a granola bar from her backpack. But I held the paper longer than necessary, reading it 3 times. Parent-guardian signature. And for the first time, there was no hesitation. No wondering whether Megan would see it first, no back and forth about who should handle the logistics, no scribbled initials in the margin or crossed-out names. I signed in bold strokes, "Linda Garrett, legal guardian." It felt strange how something so simple, a line on a form, could settle years of quiet dismissal. I folded it neatly, slid it into the return folder, and placed it back in her bag. Olivia didn't notice, but I did. Later that evening, I made dinner while Jacob set the table with too many spoons and a single napkin folded into what he insisted was a rocket. Brian came home early, a bouquet of flowers in one hand and a bag of groceries in the other. "What's the occasion?" I asked, wiping my hands. "Just wanted to cook something," he said. "You've been holding everything so long, I thought maybe it was time I remembered how—" He wasn't a good cook, not by any traditional measure, but he tried, and that counted more than seasoning or temperature. Olivia helped him read the recipe off the box, correcting him when he added too much oregano, while Jacob tried to sneak green beans into his pockets. I stood back and watched the chaos unfold, the kind of chaos that tastes like a home, messy, shared, honest. When dinner was ready, we sat down together, no one missing, no one pretending. After the kids were asleep, Brian and I sat on the back porch, a soft breeze brushing through the lilac bush. "She called again," he said, staring into the dark. "I didn't ask who. I didn't need to. She said she's not coming back, that Charlotte feels more like home than this ever did." I nodded. "She also asked if we'd be willing to let the kids visit sometime over the summer. Supervised, maybe a weekend. I folded my hands in my lap. I'm not here to punish her. But visits aren't souvenirs. I told her we'd think about it. That's fair. He hesitated. Do you hate her? I shook my head. Hate takes energy I don't have to spare. But I grieve the mother she could have been. And I protect the children from the one she chose to be. He looked down. I'm sorry I let it get that far. I'm not keeping score, I said. But I notice when people change direction. We sat for a while longer, the porch creaking beneath us like it always had, only now we were finally still enough to hear it. 2 days later, Olivia brought home a drawing of a tree. This is our family tree, she said, unrolling it across the dining table. It had 5 branches. One for her, one for Jacob, one for Brian, one for me, and one with a question mark. Miss Delaney said we could include whoever we wanted. I put you next to Daddy. Jacob and I are the bottom roots. And the question mark? That's for Mom, she said. I didn't know if I should draw her or not, so I left space in case she ever wants to show up. I blinked against the warmth, stinging my eyes. That's kind of you. It's just a branch, she shrugged, but the roots are the part that hold the tree. At church that Sunday, Olivia volunteered to read the opening prayer. She stood in front of the congregation with her small hands folded and her knees wobbling, but she read every word clearly. I pray for people who stay. And for the people who learn how, she said. People turned to look at me. I kept my eyes on her. After the service, an older woman named Mrs. Conway approached me, patting my shoulder. You've always had the look of someone carrying more than her share, she said, but today you look like someone who's finally allowed to set it down. I smiled, only because others are willing to carry it now. Monday morning, I visited the bank. It wasn't anything dramatic. I needed to add Olivia and Jacob to my emergency trust file, just in case. The woman behind the desk asked for their birth dates, their relationship to me, and my legal authority. I handed over the court documents, signed and sealed. The woman glanced at them, nodded and typed for a while. Then she said something that caught me by surprise. It's good to see a child raised by someone who doesn't just love them, but who's proved it. I left the bank with a new folder and a strange lightness in my steps. Not relief? Exactly. Something quieter, a kind of stillness that comes when you no longer have to explain yourself to anyone. Back home, I opened the hallway closet and pulled out the last of the unused boxes. Inside were old picture frames, holiday cards, and the growth chart we'd started when Olivia was 3. Megan had taken her name off most of it, peeling back stickers and removing old markings. But Olivia had redrawn it in marker. Grandma, 5 feet, strong as 2 trees. I leaned against the wall for a moment, resting my head beside the line. That night, as the children slept, I wrote them each a letter, to be opened when they were older, when they might forget the names on the court papers or the color of the apron I always wore. I told them everything, not the painful details, but the truth of what love looks like when it shows up, day after day, quietly holding the pieces others drop. And when I sealed the envelopes, I wrote their names in my steadiest handwriting, just in case someday they needed reminding. The day of the school picnic came with sun-dappled skies and just enough wind to keep the bees away from the juice boxes. I packed Olivia's favorite lunch egg salad sandwiches cut into stars, cucumber slices dusted with sea salt, and one of the last lemon cookies from our Saturday batch. Jacob insisted on helping, though his contribution mostly consisted of sneaking bites when he thought I wasn't looking. When we arrived at the park, the playground buzzed with the sound of children releasing a week's worth of pent-up energy. Parents clustered in shaded patches, juggling sunscreen and folding chairs, and the delicate social dance of forced small talk. Olivia grabbed Jacob's hand and sprinted toward the tire swing, shouting over her shoulder, "Save us a shady spot." I laid out the blanket under a sprawling oak and watched as they ran, free and untethered. A few mothers passed by and offered polite hellos. One of them, a tall woman in a straw hat with a baby on her hip, lingered. "You're Olivia's?" she asked gently, clearly not wanting to assume. "Guardian," I said, then added, "Grandmother, both." She smiled. "I've seen you at drop-off. She's a sweet girl." "She is," I replied. She looked like she wanted to ask more, but thought better of it. That was happening more lately. People recognized that I had nothing to prove, and that they'd likely hear the story from someone else anyway. I sat alone for a little while, listening to the thrum of laughter and soft soccer ball thuds across the grass, watching Olivia guide Jacob around the sandbox, showing him how to build a wall for his crumbling castle. It reminded me of Brian as a boy, shy, tender, easily missed if you didn't look closely. He had called that morning just before we left. "I wanted to say something," he'd said, voice tight with hesitation. "I've been thinking a lot about that line on the family tree Olivia made." "The one with the question mark?" I asked. "No," he said quietly. "The part about roots." I waited. "She's right. You've been the roots. I was the wind for a while, scattering, indecisive, but I'd like to start being the kind of tree she can lean on too." I didn't say much in return. Some words don't need acknowledgement, just space to settle. Halfway through the picnic, Olivia returned breathless and red-cheeked, dropping beside me and grabbing her water bottle. "There's a game starting soon. Can we stay for it?" "Of course," I said. Then she looked down at the corner of the blanket. "Is Mom coming?" "No, sweetheart. She's still in Charlotte." She nodded without much expression. Some kids said their moms were coming, so I wasn't sure. I touched her shoulder. "Would it help if I told you that she thought about you?" She shrugged. "Sometimes I forget what she sounds like." "You remember her in your own way," I said. "And that's okay." She leaned against me for a moment, her hair damp with sweat, the weight of her so familiar it might have been my own limb. Then she sprang up again, full of energy and joy, darting back into the field. I watched her run with the other children. She didn't lag behind. She wasn't guarded. She just was. Later, while Jacob napped in the car and Olivia dug through her prize bag for a sticker book, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. The sun had deepened the lines on my face. My braid was fraying at the edges, the apron I wore was speckled with a streak of mustard and something that looked suspiciously like crayon wax. And still, I had never felt more present. That evening, back at home, Olivia carefully peeled stickers from their sheets and pressed them into her journal, each page a tiny moment made permanent. I was putting away the picnic blanket when I noticed the edge had started to fray. It was one of the old quilts, repurposed long ago, soft and worn but reliable. Just like me, I thought. I didn't repair it right away. Some things are allowed to carry their use visibly. Let them show the wear as proof of all the places they've been. Jacob woke up from his nap, disoriented, sweaty and confused. I knelt beside his bed and whispered his name until he blinked the fog away. He clung to my apron with both hands and murmured, "I thought you were gone." "I'm always here, baby," I said. His breathing slowed. I pulled the covers around him and stayed for a moment, watching his chest rise and fall, and I realized then he no longer feared that love would vanish without warning. He'd begun to believe in the constancy of presence. That, I thought, is the beginning of healing. After the children were tucked in, I returned to the kitchen, where Brian was cleaning up dishes from the picnic bag. "You packed the exact lunch she always asks for," he said, rinsing out a thermos. "She remembers the details. I try to honor that." He nodded. "She told me tonight she wants to be like you when she grows up." I folded a towel and hung it on the oven handle. "She already is." He turned off the faucet, "And I'm trying." "I know," I said, "and she'll know it too, in time." He nodded again, this time with something close to gratitude. When I went to bed that night, I looked at the clock, 10:48 p.m. I reached into the drawer beside me and opened the envelope addressed to Olivia, the one I'd written days earlier. I added a single sentence to the end. "Today you ran across the grass and didn't look back, and I knew you were learning to be free without forgetting who kept the door open." Then I resealed it. Some truths, I've learned, are best given quietly at just the right time. It was a Thursday morning when I got the call from Olivia's school. The tone of the secretary's voice was calm, but clipped in that way that meant something needed tending, not an emergency, but certainly not something to ignore. "Miss Garrett, could you come in sometime today? Olivia's teacher would like to speak with you in person." No further explanation, just a "when you're able" and a polite "thank you." I didn't wait. I put away the dishes mid-rinse, wiped my hands on my apron, and told Jacob we'd be leaving soon. He held my hand in the car as I drove, quietly humming to himself the way he did when he didn't want to ask questions. When we arrived, the school hallways were filled with that familiar din of mid-morning shuffling feet, distant laughter, the zip of backpacks being opened and shut. Ms. Delaney met me outside her classroom, her eyes gentle but serious. "I didn't mean to worry you," she began, leading me to a quiet bench by the window. "Olivia's okay, but I thought you should see something." She handed me a piece of paper, the kind children write their free-form thoughts on no prompts, just lines and crayons and space to say whatever they felt. At the top was Olivia's handwriting. What home means to me. She'd drawn our kitchen table, with her and Jacob sitting at it, and me behind them, apron on, holding a spatula. The stove glowed orange, and a pie sat cooling on the counter. It wasn't the artistry that caught me, it was the label she wrote beneath each person. Jacob, my funny brother. Grandma, my real home. Me, the person who makes the world feel steady. Miss Delaney said softly, some of the kids wrote about houses, rooms, even pets. Olivia wrote about you. I stared at the paper. There were no embellishments, no edits, just truth. She doesn't say much about her mother, the teacher continued, and we don't press, but I thought this might matter to you. It does, I said, carefully folding the page. Do you want to take it home? I think I'd rather leave it here. Let her know her truth is welcome in this building. The teacher nodded with something like admiration. Before I left, I stopped by the window outside Olivia's classroom. She hadn't seen me yet. She was bent over her desk, tongue peeking out the side of her mouth as she focused on tracing something in bright pink. I didn't wave. I just watched her as she became someone unafraid to take up space. That afternoon, I picked her up a little early. We went to the corner bakery and shared a lemon tart by the window. She told me about the caterpillars they were raising in science class and how one of them was definitely lazy and might just be a worm in disguise. When we got home, she ran to show Jacob the tiny prize she'd gotten from the teacher's sticker drawer, a blue glitter pencil she wanted to save for special writing. What kind of special? Jacob asked, skeptical. She doesn't know yet, I answered for her, but she'll know when the moment comes. Later that night, while folding laundry in the living room, Brian came in holding a box I hadn't seen in years. I found this in the garage behind the water heater, he said. I think it's from your old apartment. He set it on the couch beside me and sat down, cross-legged like he used to when he was a boy and needed to tell me something important. Inside were old recipe cards, curled at the edges, written in my handwriting and my mother's. Underneath them, tucked in a faded manila envelope, were photographs, some of Brian in his high school uniform, some of him as a toddler in the yard holding a garden hose the wrong way. And at the bottom, carefully folded, was a letter I'd forgotten I'd written to myself after Brian's wedding. The handwriting was a little shaky, the ink had faded, but I remembered every word. If they don't see you, be someone worth remembering anyway. I passed the letter to him. He read it in silence. Did you think I'd forget you? He asked. No, I said, but I knew one day I might need to remind myself I was more than someone's helper. He looked at me, softer now. You were always the anchor. I was the one drifting. And anchors don't chase, I said. He nodded. But they wait, and they hold. That weekend, Olivia asked if she could turn part of her new room into a quiet corner. She brought a stack of cushions and her sticker books, and I gave her an old basket to store her journals. I want it to be where I go when I have big feelings, she said, and maybe where I can write about them too. I placed a small lamp beside the basket, the one that used to sit by my sewing table. She turned it on, sat cross-legged, and began to write. Jacob tried to join her, but she made him promise not to knock over her thinking pile. I just want to sit next to you, he said. She sighed, made space, and passed him a blank notebook. That was how I found them later, two children nestled beside each other, surrounded by pillows, each writing something they might one day read back to themselves to remember who they were becoming. That night, I added one more page to the envelope meant for Olivia's future. You found your voice not by speaking the loudest, but by refusing to stay silent when it mattered. You are not just growing up, you are growing in. Summer arrived slowly, as if unsure it was welcome after the long winter that had settled inside our walls. The mornings were warmer now. The sunlight slid through the curtains earlier, brushing my cheek before the alarm had a chance to chime. Jacob no longer woke from naps with that same startled cry. Olivia hummed more often. She hummed while brushing her teeth, while arranging her socks, while waiting for toast to pop. Her voice floated through the house, like a melody too subtle to name, but unmistakable all the same. The day started like most others. I tied my apron, swept up crumbs from last night's popcorn, and packed the children's lunches. Jacob preferred his sandwich crusts, trimmed in triangles. Olivia wanted hers whole, because triangles fall apart too easily. Then came a knock at the door. It wasn't the mailman, it wasn't a neighbor, it was Megan. She stood there in a pale blazer and heels too tall for our uneven porch. Her hair was pulled tight, her makeup subtle, her face looked as if it had been scrubbed clean of the last year, only her eyes gave her away, tired in that quiet way women get when they've convinced themselves they've healed. "Hi," she said. "Hello, Megan." I was in town. I waited. "I'm not here to make trouble," she said. "I wanted to talk, maybe see the kids, just for a moment." I stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind me. "They're not here," I said. "They're at the community center. Summer reading club." Her lips parted slightly, as if she hadn't expected an answer that simple. She looked past me into the house. "It's changed," she said. "The yard, the flowers, there's chalk on the steps." "Children live here," I said. She flinched, but didn't argue. "I know I didn't leave well." "No," I said, "you didn't. I've had time to think. I hope you used it well." She exhaled. "I came back because I've been offered a job in town. Counseling, part-time. I thought maybe I could start again." "Start again where?" I asked. "Because the life that was here has moved forward." "I'm not asking to replace you," she said quickly. "I just want to be present." "There's a difference between presence and intrusion." She looked down at the wood grain under her shoes. "I thought maybe I could ask Olivia to have lunch. Or Jacob. Just see how they're doing." "I'll tell them you stopped by," I said, "and I'll let them decide." Megan nodded. It was the first honest moment I'd seen in her all morning. Before she turned to leave, she said softly, "I saw her picture in the school newsletter. Olivia. She looked steady." "She is," I said. "She used to be so unsure. She needed room to become herself," I said. "Now she has it." Megan bit her lip. "You did what I couldn't." "No," I said. "I did what I wouldn't let anyone else undo." That evening, I told Olivia about the visit. She didn't respond right away. She just continued flipping through the pages of her reading log, her thumb running along the sticker she'd earned for finishing 4-chapter books in a single week. Then she said, "Did she ask if I was mad?" "No." "Because I'm not mad," she said, "but I'm not ready either." "That's fair. Do I have to see her?" "Only when you want to, and only how you want to." Olivia nodded. "Maybe when I have something to say. But right now, I have more things to read than feelings to explain." I smiled. "That's a good place to be." She grinned. "I thought so." The next day, I took the children to the community garden. Each child had a small wooden marker with their name on it. Olivia's garden bed was full of strawberries and basil. Jacob's was mostly empty, save for a single sprouting sunflower he named Beepo. While they watered and pulled weeds, I sat under the shade of an awning with my notebook. I wasn't writing anything in particular, just letting thoughts find their way to the page. One of the volunteers, a woman named Carla, walked over and handed me a cup of iced tea. "You're the guardian, right? Of Olivia and Jacob?" I nodded. "She talks about you like a lighthouse," Carla said. "Always there, always glowing." I blinked slowly. Children see clearly before they learn to edit. Carla smiled. "We could use someone like you here, someone steady." I didn't answer right away. I watched Olivia kneel by her basil plant, gently pressing soil around its base. "Maybe," I said. That night, Jacob asked if we could name the rooms in the house. "Name them?" I asked. "Yeah, like the way ships have names. Olivia gets her garden bed. I want to name stuff too." I laughed. "All right, what should we name the kitchen?" He tilted his head. "The Flavor Fort." "And your room?" "The Nap Castle." I turned to Olivia. "And yours?" She grinned. "The Library of Secret Thoughts." "And what about this one?" I asked, sweeping my hand toward the hallway closet. She thought for a long moment. "The Remembering Place," she said, "because it has your aprons and our old pictures and the papers you keep for us." That night, I took a marker and wrote each name on a little paper tag. We hung them on the doors together. The last tag Olivia handed me said, "Linda's room," and underneath it, in tiny handwriting, "Home base."